go through, increase your PPOs as much as you possibly can. Get every nickel and dime you can from the insurance companies before you write off removing participation, because the goal there is to take your bottom line and put it up through something like PPO negotiations. Then it puts you in a whole different situation where maybe you can be like, okay, we have tons of patients coming to the office. We are getting paid well on those patients. We can go ahead and maybe add an associate and they can start taking on that. Sometimes that means that the main dentist can decide, you know what, I'm not going to take this low paying plan. I can move off of that, and then kind of work in a way that they're getting more even fee for service, but it doesn't lose volume for the practice.
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast, where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? I'm Steve Jensen, a data dental nerd and your host.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Growth in Dentistry podcast. Super excited for today's conversation. It is getting harder and harder to run a profitable dental practice in the United States for so many reasons, and we're going to talk about some ways we can think about improving the business without having to see way more patients, without having to take on way more Invisalign cases or expand what you're doing clinically. We're going to have a really fun conversation around fee negotiating. Now, before I introduce my guest, a quick shout out to the marketing team at Dental Intelligence for sponsoring this podcast week after week. A lot of work goes in behind the scenes. And as always, they have a special offer for the guests and fellow listeners of the pod. For anyone, if you've not checked out DI in a long time or you've never checked it out, they're offering a $50 gift card just for taking a demo. Now, if you don't know what DI is, they have everything from giving you basically like a business x-ray of your dental practice to give you all the numbers and reports in one cool dashboard, all the way to engaging with your patients, automated communications, digital forms that write back to Dentrix, EagleSoft, Open Dental, revenue cycle management things like insurance claims management portals where you can submit your claims and see their status, as well as collecting past due balances from patients with their payments and RCM tools. So they're doing so many things that are super cool. If you've not checked it out in a while, or you didn't know they do those things and you want to check it out now, it's definitely a cool way to consolidate a lot of the tools you're using today. So, okay, with that out of the way, I want to introduce Kelsey Porter. So hello, Kelsey. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. How about yourself?
So good. So I'll highlight Kelsey. Kelsey, if you guys didn't know this, DI, Dental Intelligence, is located, headquartered in Utah, and Kelsey is a fellow Utah person. She just lives like 15 minutes away from our office. And Kelsey and a group of highly, highly great people, yeah, I don't know how I want to say that, like experts in the field, started Beacon PPO about 4+ years ago. And they've got combined over 20 years of experience in fee negotiation, working with how do I run a PPO-driven practice and still be profitable? What are like the common missteps that people make? We're going to talk about how do I think about doing this? How often do I think about negotiating my fees? And even we'll talk about like how do you engage with a business like Kelsey? Like how do I get started? What's the process? We'll kind of talk through this whole thing. But first, Kelsey, I want to hear from you. Like, how did you end up in the fee negotiation business? I don't think any kid in grade school or junior high fills out their career form and says, you know what, like I'm gonna do fee negotiation for dentists, and that's not on like the bingo card. So talk me through how you got here.
It's actually such a niche. I kind of tripped into it by just getting a job at a company that does PPO fee negotiations.
Okay,
cool.
And
at the time, and when I applied, I had no idea what that meant, because it's not really something that is, no one really knows what that even is in a general sense. So when people were like, what do you do there? I was like, well, it's a long story, but I actually started working there. I worked there for about 11 years.
Cool.
And within the first few months, kind of worked my way up to where I was really grasping and actually changing the way that things were done in the industry with PPO negotiations. It's a lot more complicated than you initially would think.
Yeah.
So, and we'll kind of get into a little bit of that, but myself and my sister Bailey both have combined experience. We both co-own and started Beacon PPO Solutions, and we each have unique background, about 10 years apiece in doing PPO negotiations. So
talk me through some of the like the basics. So I'm a dentist. I mentioned to you before the show, but I'll mention to listeners, I go speak around the country and I'll ask folks, like, that's a common question I like to ask them, because there are only a few levers you can pull to improve the profits of a dental practice. And one of those is like how many appointments we complete. Like, we can see way more patients, but that's a pretty stressful way to increase our profits.
Right.
Because like I have to like schedule more people, or I have to hire more hygienists and associates to like get that volume. But the next way I can improve my production or my profits in the business is I can improve my production per visit, or my like production per appointment, if you look at it that way. And go ahead.
Without even changing how many patients are coming in the practice.
Yes.
So, the profitability of, doing a crown, if you can negotiate that up and have each insurance company sending you an extra $200 per claim every time you do a crown, that money really adds up. So it's like you can continue to do the same amount of business you're doing.
Yes.
And if you work on negotiating your fee schedules, you can maintain being in network, so that kind of drives patients to the practice. And then kind of just move it up that way. So PPO negotiations really is kind of that thing, like do exactly what you're doing, the same volume you're doing. You don't even have to change anything else. Just going through and negotiating those, it brings you up significantly.
Yeah. So can you maybe like tell us, like, with some of the clients you've worked with, what are kind of some of the common missteps? Or maybe we talk about like how many years, because one of the things I'll do is I'll have people raise their hand and say, hey, have you negotiated fees in the last year? And I get a couple of hands. And then, have you negotiated fees in the last 3 years? And maybe a couple more hands pop up. And it seems to me that like a lot of dental practice owners and office managers, like, it's such a busy business to run with high patient volume. There's so many things that we're juggling, that this is one of those things that can slip through the cracks for years, it seems like. So maybe that's the first question. What's a good, like, how often should I be negotiating my fees? And then let's talk about like, well, how do we actually do that?
Yeah. So the insurance companies actually can renew your contracts every 2 years. So if you negotiate with an insurance company, you accept a new fee schedule, or even they automatically issue you an automatic fee increase, that's kind of starts your 2-year mark. Some companies, a couple do 3 years, but generally most carriers will do a fee review every 2. So for offices that have never ever negotiated, you're probably sitting on fee schedules that match up with the market fees of when you actually credentialed. So some people that we work with, all of a sudden they're like, oh, we've never negotiated. Our office has been open 40 years and we've been on these plans for 30 years. And I'm like, that's crazy. Whatever they've gotten as far as improvements have been little by little, because it's not like the insurance companies are looking at the market and saying automatically, oh man, what would be fair is if we give Dr. So-and-so an increase of 20% to put him in a fair spot. The insurance companies are never going to work in that best interest of the practice. So in a roundabout way, that's kind of what you're looking at, is negotiating every 2 to 3 years, always, if you're going to be a PPO driven practice or even have PPO participation. That way you just know you're getting as much as you possibly can incrementally over the lifespan of your practice.
Maybe another question. I'm just like being curious here. So listeners, if you know this stuff, then sorry. But with these negotiations, so if I'm doing this every 2 to 3 years, or maybe if I haven't done it in a long time, can I like jump tiers when I negotiate? Or does the insurance companies, are they kind of hardcore where it's like, nah, like, we'll just give you the next bump, and then like you kind of have to negotiate every 2-3 years to like get these bumps? Or can I make like a big jump in my first year of negotiation and then like grow from there? Does that make sense what I'm asking? Like,
amazing question. You don't necessarily have to tier your way up on their scale of fee schedules, which is great. But that's where companies like us really excel at doing this, because typically if an office reaches out to get an increase to say their Aetna contract, and Aetna's like, okay, sure, here's what we've got for you. And a lot of the time that increase is a 2 to 5% improvement, which isn't really that much. I mean, but the dentist sees it as like, oh, look, they got us a new fee schedule, let's get that going. But if you are tedious in the way that you go through negotiations, you can really nickel and dime these companies to jump up to the market. So kind of in line with what you're asking is, a lot of the time these insurance companies are looking at the market across the board. So what all the other insurance carriers are charging for their fee schedules, right?
Mm-hmm.
And each of these insurance companies actually have partnerships with each other. So just as an example, and this is where it might get a little bit confusing, Aetna PPO, you can be in network with a direct contract and have a set fee schedule with them, or
Mm-hmm.
you can be in network with them, piggybacking off your other contracts, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So these insurance companies have contracts where even if you don't contract with Aetna, they can put you in network through one of your other carriers, one of your other contracts, if they've got a leasing agreement there.
Okay,
So
interesting.
because of that, we go through, and when we do negotiations, we reach out to every negotiable company and every contract that you have to try to get a fee increase. We're simultaneously looking at each fee schedule side by side. So if Aetna has 10 different options to be in network, we can go and say, okay, I see this option for Aetna. It's paying 30% higher than they are. That's
Mm-hmm.
when you take those comparisons back to Aetna and say, we know the game. We know we have options to be in network with your insurance through other carriers. This is what they're offering. And then that's when all of a sudden you're putting the insurance company in a position where they're like, they know what their options are. And so that's when you start getting these jumps in fees.
Cool.
Not 5%, more like 10, more like 20, big improvements. But you really have to use the data for the market to try to drive your leverage. Otherwise, they're going to try to just say, no, 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 if they don't think you know their game with the leasing.
Mm-hmm. Now tell me, one of the questions I have as you were talking, like, can I game the system at all? I don't know if this is even possible. Like, meaning, let's say I know, like, I'm not going to do crown and bridge in my practice. I'm not going to do, some of these codes, but I do want to do this specific procedure. Maybe it's like, I'm using crowns, but that's probably a bad example because most general dentists do. Or like, hey, I want to get more aggressive on my, I don't know, on some specific procedures, and like I can kind of do the math and say, oh, if I can get these ones higher, but these ones lower, do they play that game, or is it not really that way with the insurance companies?
For the most part, anytime we negotiate, it's not a game of like recalibration a lot of the time.
Okay.
So more often, pretty much with any carrier, when you ask for a fee increase, typically across the board, they're increasing things. There are a couple of
Okay, cool.
companies that kind of rebalance. And if maybe a code like the Crown code, the D7 2740,
Yeah.
is changed for a company for their market, they might lower that. But that's where we're very, very combative with the insurance company.
Cool.
Go
But
back and
not.
yeah. So when we go through and negotiate, we keep very, very close track of the important codes for the practice. There are like
Cool.
35 to 40 codes that each
Yeah.
practice typically is billing out using for 95% of their
Yeah.
revenue. So paying close attention to those and tracking them one by one to see where they've jumped and continue negotiating on a code by code basis as well. So to answer your question before, you can't really go through and like selectively, I mean,
Like kind of game it that way.
I guess you could. It would be very tedious because there are so many different carriers and they're all allowing different amounts.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to decide what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is when you go through negotiations, you can get each code that means something to you to go up. It's very seldomly that we see offices get decreases to codes. And if a company tries to pull something like that, that's where we pull out our strategies of maybe changing up the way that they're in network, like those leasing
Mm-hmm.
arrangements that I mentioned, kind of being like, maybe it makes sense to see these members through a different avenue and then
Yeah.
get in network a different way and on a fee schedule that's going to be better for the dentist.
And then, even now that you're saying that out loud, I was thinking, yeah, you're actually right. Like, and even if we parse it down, there's probably only like a handful of codes that are like really, really high volume, at least in like a general practice. It's like my exam codes, both the periodic eval as well as like the limited, and then I've got my D1110 for the cleaning, and then I have my x-rays that I'm taking and imaging codes, and then my classic fillings that I'm doing and crowns. Like that's like a high volume. Even crowns is probably way low in comparison to those. So on those high volume ones, are the insurance companies more strict because they understand like, oh man, if we increase by a couple bucks there, then that changes the game, or are they just kind of get it and that they do the increase? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it depends on who's asking. I mean, I think that they try to do that when practices reach out to negotiate their fees, but With us, when we reach out, we also include all of those top procedures, like that top 35, top 40 that I mentioned, and tell them like, these are going to be the priority for the practice. Like they
Yeah.
need to see increases to these. We negotiate the full fee schedules, but I mean, there are thousands of codes and you use maybe 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely can target your negotiations to be more like that. And at this point, insurance companies expect that. They're not in a position where they're trying to kind of work around. They know what the office is looking for. They know what they want to increase. They might try to apply more to other codes across the fee schedule if you're not actively sending them the codes and data that you're trying to prioritize in the negotiation.
And then maybe tell me like, I have a couple more questions on like kind of the same train of thought. So once I've gone through this whole process, how long does it take? And then I'm curious to hear like, what kind of lifts do you see with practices? Like how much more can I increase collections from doing, this fee negotiation process?
Yeah. So typically going through the negotiation process, because we usually take about 5 to 6 months to get through
Yeah, I
that.
was going to say, it
And
sounds like
a
it's like
couple
a kind of
additional
lengthy
months.
process. Yeah.
Right. Because first off, you reach out to about 20 companies. So even if you have, we're very thorough in trying to get data for what other carriers are offering too, so that it can be added to the leverage. And also because of those leasing arrangements I mentioned before, where an office can add something like Connection Dental or Dynamax and be in network with
Yep.
50, 60 different contracts, 50 or 60 different carriers through that. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So it takes a long time because we're also going back and forth and negotiating 3-4 proposals per company, putting that together and really, really working these. Anytime a company or even an office is kind of doing negotiations, it is a tedious work. And a lot of the time after you get that first proposal and even maybe a second proposal and they're giving some resistance, they're like, you know what, this is as good as it's going to get.
Yeah.
But when we go through negotiations, like if for like a direct contract, you can see increases anywhere between like, on the lowest end, like 5%, but on like a higher end for a direct contract, 15, 20, 25 sometimes. If you start messing with the structure, so those strategic leasing arrangements, we've moved a lot of offices around where we found their direct contract increase maybe 10%, but in comparison, we see an option for that carrier that pays 40% higher. And that's not even an outlandish number.
Yeah.
You go and re-navigate that participation to remain in network, but be paid on that other contract they have for 40%, 50% higher. That's not even outlandish numbers when it comes to what's possible through like restructuring and taking advantage of these leasing arrangements.
Yeah, I'm just kind of doing some mental math right now. Like I'm just doing hygiene. So like if you have a hygienist that's doing, maybe I'll even make it lower. Let's say they've got 1 cancellation a day. So it's like 7 visits a day. So D1110s times that by, I think that typical hygienist is somewhere between like 210 and 220 working days a year on like 4 days a week. So it's like 1,500 D1110s per hygienist per year. So like if we just are able to increase that fee by $5, then we're talking about $7,700 in collections that year, So it's like
Exactly.
so sometimes those like, so you mentioned I just did like, I don't know, 5% on $100. Like if
Right.
that kind of small change, just so people as you're listening, you're kind of like doing some of that mental math, like those high volume ones, like those make a big impact on collections where all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, like I can keep paying my hygienist what I need to pay them to make that make sense when I get these little increases,
No, exactly. And it lets some pressure off because I don't think that many offices, I know that they get frustrated with their PPO reimbursements and their allowables, but
Yeah.
any dentists I've worked with, when they actually go and take a look at a claim and say, I did that for that much, it's just kind of like a switch in their head that's like, it's kind of a no-brainer
Yeah.
that you really do need to pay attention to what these insurance companies are basically like forcing you into. There's a lot of improvement that can be made, even just as, like you said, on a code that you do thousands of times by the end of the year, up at a few bucks, and you're taking a look at quite a lot more that you can work with. The PPO participation is great because a lot of patients are looking for dentists that are in network.
Yeah.
of course that comes with a write-off, but that's where PPO participation, if it's not profitable or if you're not paying attention to this, it's probably your biggest revenue leak.
Yeah.
I mean, most offices that start up with us that have never negotiated, writing off about 50 to 60% of their fee.
Yeah, it's so painful.
I know, it's just, I'm like, that's horrible. You billed out 2 million and got $750,000. And that, when you put it in perspective of the numbers, it's a significant amount of money that's kind of draining through there.
Now I have, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You mentioned kind of the time it takes, so 5 or 6 months. Help me understand kind of the me, I'm an office, I want to go through this process. Talk me through what kind of expectations do I need to have from my team if I'm an owner and I'm having a team member help with this. Like how much burden is going to be on me and the team to like help you guys with negotiations versus how much do you guys do? Because I'm assuming I'm going to have to help produce some reports. I think if I remember right, then like the dentist has to be the one that negotiates. Is that true? And then you guys kind of negotiate through the dentist. How does that all work?
No. So
Okay,
most carriers work with consultants on negotiations. There are like 2 carriers that even like they'll let us submit the request and they're aware that we're taking care of it, but they will send the proposal to the office, whoever the office contact is. So we have a couple of office managers that are like, hey, they sent us this, and then we script them something back, but that's like 2 out of 20 companies.
Cool.
The others, generally, they have it down. They know that consultants are reaching out to do this on behalf of the dentists, and there's no problem.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So talk me through like workload, like how much over those 5 or 6 months, like how much time do I need to kind of allocate for this project to make sure it goes like smoothly and successfully working along?
There's very little time on the practice side. So initially they get us agreement basically saying like, hey, these guys we're giving them permission to reach out to get our fee schedules and to negotiate on your behalf. Obviously,
and that agreement goes to each of these insurances that they're contracted with. Cool.
Right. And it's just for them to communicate with us. Like any fee increases go to like that need to be accepted. It has to be signed by the dentist, obviously. Nothing, no contract changes on our part. And then getting a couple of reports, just like UCR fees. For most of our practices, if they want it, we include a free UCR fee evaluation where we can actually take a look at their fee versus the market of UCR fees in the office and kind of show them, hey, you're on the lower end. It might be beneficial to up these before we move forward with negotiations. Cool. Not that it's going to dictate, but it does give more leverage being like, hey, our costs have gone up. Here are our new fees. We do need an increase. Yep. And then other than that, just productivity reports so we can identify what those main codes are for the practice. That way we can really, really strategically steer the negotiations. Most offices, before they even get started with us, like during their consultation phase, I do a free PPO revenue analysis. So most practices will actually send me all of their numbers as far as the previous year collections per insurance carrier. And then even before we get them signed on or anything, I go through and tell them what their potential is. And that way, during the process, we can give them an estimated return on investment. Because a 5% increase with a company like Guardian could mean huge. It could mean not so huge, depending on how much they do with that. Yeah. So we are very, very transparent in trying to equate a percentage increase to potential revenue.
Now, I don't know if you're allowed to say this kind of stuff on a recording or not, but are there like insurance carriers? Because people are contracted with all sorts of ones. There's obviously the big ones like Delta, Blue Cross, Tongues Tied, Blue Shield, Aetna, Cigna, you name it. Are there some that are like way hard to negotiate with and some that are easier so that listeners are like, oh man, if I'm contracted with this one, then I need to like get on it?
There are a couple that don't negotiate. The rest can be flexible and can be worked with. And I can say who it is because everybody already knows Delta Dental is not going to negotiate.
So they won't. And there's not even like a request where I can say like, hey, bump it up. Like there's just nothing.
I've tried for huge DSOs. I've tried for, they're not going to do it.
Okay.
If they're going to improve any fees, they try to keep all fee schedules for providers uniform for the region. So if they're going to do an increase, which in some areas this year, they actually did issue an increase of about, I think 3%, something like that, which is better than nothing.
Yes.
Then that's as good as you're going to get. With Blue Cross Blue Shield, they have so many different plans in so many areas that some are flexible depending on their leasing arrangements, but
Okay.
generally they don't really negotiate custom fee schedules either. But everything else, yes. But that's why I do the free PPO revenue
Analysis.
analysis,
Yeah,
because I can
cool.
show them, because most offices are always going to say Delta's our number one. It's like, yes, I know, everyone's. So we can take a look at all the other carriers. I can look at how much negotiable revenue is in the practice. If there's more than like 100,000, there's definitely something that can be done to up, because even if you get a 10% increase on that, you know what I mean? You can really, really work with what you've got. And so you may as well start negotiating where you can. And then it's nice because some practices that we optimize for, sometimes that we reconstruct the way they're in network, and all of a sudden for most carriers are getting 40% higher than what they were. It takes less pressure on accepting some of these lower paying plans
Yep.
that, you know, that practices feel obligated to take because they're just trying to get as many patients in the door. And it just lets off some pressure when you start optimizing where you can and then see where everything falls.
Yeah, interesting. So then that doesn't surprise me that Blue Cross Blue Shield and especially Delta remain the big bad behemoths on the top. So
I can tell you why too, is it's because they don't have these leasing arrangements.
okay.
So all these other carriers, the reason that they're able to negotiate is you can be in network with their same members through other carriers. They've done this fee schedule sharing program
Yeah.
basically to get more in network doctors. And
Yep.
then it gives them the flexibility to say, oh, cool, we have 5 different fee schedule options to process this claim. Which one are we going to use? Obviously,
Yep.
the lowest one. So when there's leasing arrangements, these insurance companies know they need to compete to keep on providers. Delta, some like Delta, they don't lease to anyone. If you're going to be in network, you have to contract with them. And that's why they've pretty much figured out how to just lock it in.
Yeah, those suckers. But it's helpful to know, like, for anyone listening, it like sets the right expectation for like, okay, like, how do I think about this project? Where am I going to get wins? Where might I not get wins? Like, so that's really, really helpful. And then talk me through, like, maybe, at the end here, I've got maybe 2 last questions. The first one, like, how does someone start the process of working with a consultant like you? Because I think for a lot of folks, they just don't even know where to start. It sounds like I mean, I'm assuming you can probably go to Beacon PPO. Is it beaconppo.com? And then
Beacon PPO Solutions.com.
solutions.com. And I'll throw that in the show notes. And then, what's the first kind of step is to do a fee analysis? Talk me through that. Like, how do you get started with the project?
Yeah. So for the first thing we do, when you go to our website, there's a button to book a consultation with me. It's a free consultation. We can take as much time as you want. To kind of go through things. We can take a look at what participation you have, what your practice goals are, and then also I can kind of work with what you have and let you know what we do and what the expectation is.
Cool.
Also, just giving us a quick call. Whoever answers can usually either get you on my calendar or see if I'm available.
Sweet.
So that's number one. After that, once we do a consultation call and I kind of have a good idea, I send out a proposal, but I also request that you send me data just for your revenue per carrier from your practice management system, usually for the full previous year to start off with. So we can kind of take a look. And then from there, I can kind of break it down and say, hey, even though Delta Dental is like 40%, 50% of what you do, with all your negotiable companies that you have flexibility with, this is how much revenue you have. Even on the very lowest end, this is what a return on investment could mean. So we're very, very good at showing that very, very base expectation. And from there, it goes up significantly. So we have, even though I'm like, if you get a set 5% across the board, this is what you're looking at. But most practices see anywhere between like 15, 20, up to 50% increases with some carriers.
Yeah, it's so sweet. Okay, that's super helpful. This has been, Kelsey, time has flown. I love conversations like this. Has been really insightful for me. I'm sure super insightful for the listeners. Now, to finish up, I asked the same question to every guest on the podcast. And the question is, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? So I want you just to think about you've been in dentistry for a long time. Obviously, your angle on dentistry is heavily involved in working with insurance companies, PPOs, and negotiating there. So I would love to hear from your perspective, what does growth in dentistry mean to you?
For me, because of like my specific little niche, I think the best thing that I can offer with that is, you can continue to see patients in your office. You can continue to get an influx of patients in your office with when you're in network with the carriers that they are insured with.
Yep.
The best thing to do is to try to get anything you can for the work you're already doing. So growth in dentistry for me is go through, increase your PPOs as much as you possibly can. Get every nickel and dime you can from the insurance companies before you write off removing participation, because the goal there is to take your bottom line and put it up through something like PPO negotiations. Then it puts you in a whole different situation where maybe you can be like, okay, we have tons of patients coming to the office. We are getting paid well on those patients. We can go ahead and maybe add an associate and they can start taking on that. Sometimes that means that the main dentist can decide, you know what, I'm not going to take this low paying plan. I can move off of that, and then kind of work in a way that they're getting more even fee for service. But it doesn't lose volume for the practice, if that makes sense. So the nice thing is PPO negotiations, I see a lot of our practices just bring up their bottom line just by doing this. It takes about 6 months to go through and do it. All of a sudden you're getting paid more on a claim to claim basis. And it gives you the flexibility of being like, hey, now that we have more money coming in, what does that mean for our practice? Do we want to hire more? Do we want to get more hygienists in another chair? Do we want to hire an associate to take on some of that workload so that the main doctor can back off? That's kind of what the vision of growth in dentistry is for me.
Yeah, I love that. Unlocking increased revenue without changing a dang thing in the practice. That's like that's a pretty sweet way to grow. So, well, Kelsey, thank you for joining today. Like I said, been a lot of fun. And folks, I hope you check out Beacon PPO Solutions. Like I said, I'll put that website in the show notes. So beaconppsolutions.com with an S, right? Solutions.com.
Yes.
So I'll throw it in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to Kelsey and team. They're awesome.
Yep.
And
take care of you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining again. This has been another episode of the Growth in Dentistry podcast. Keep growing and we'll talk soon. See you guys.